The jungle breathes differently at night. It's not just the insects or the distant cries of unseen creatures. It's the feeling that the forest itself is listening. The men who entered it that evening were not the first to sense it, nor would they be the last. They were soldiers, trained to measure danger, to recognize patterns of sound and movement. Yet what they encountered that week could not be measured, tracked, or explained. It began, as all stories of vanishing do, with an order. A simple patrol assignment into territory marked on the map as unexplored but safe. But in the jungles of Southeast Asia, safety is a lie written in ink that the rain erases by morning. The platoon, 12 men in total, moved under the humid weight of monsoon air. The sound of their boots was swallowed by mud and roots. Captain Ree, the oldest among them, carried his rifle like an extension of his will, a man who had seen too much of war, but still believed in reason. The others followed him, younger, restless, half believing that courage could keep them safe from the unknown. For 3 days, they advanced through terrain that seemed to shift beneath their feet. Compass needles twitched as if pulled by invisible threads. The radio crackled with interference, and sometimes, when the men listened closely, they swore they heard whispers between the static, voices that spoke their names, though no one answered the calls. On the 4th morning, as the mist thinned above the canopy, one of the soldiers, Private Min, noticed something unusual at the base of a limestone ridge. It was a hollow half hidden by moss and vines, the entrance shaped not like a cave's jagged mouth, but like a perfect circle, smooth and deliberate, as if carved by hands that understood geometry. The captain ordered a perimeter check, but curiosity outpaced command. Min crouched near the opening, holding his flashlight into the darkness. The beam stretched only a few meters before vanishing completely, swallowed whole. No reflection, no end. Just a silence that pressed back. He whispered, "Sir." "It's like it's waiting." Captain Ree stepped closer, studying the strange symmetry. Around the tunnel's rim were faint engravings, almost erased by time. Spirals, symbols, lines that resembled ancient scripts but didn't belong to any known language. One of the men, a university student before the war, thought they looked like Proto-Javanese runes. Another said they reminded him of burial markings. Yet there was no smell of decay, no bones, no sign of life. Only a low, humming vibration in the air, so faint it could be mistaken for one's heartbeat. By noon, the captain made a decision that would haunt him. They would enter, not far, just to map the interior and return. The tunnel, after all, might be a wartime relic, a forgotten bunker, but deep down, every man felt the same word forming unspoken in his chest: trap. They tied ropes to each other, a chain of human faith, and stepped into the circular dark. The first thing they noticed was the sound. There wasn't any. No echo, no rustle of boots. Even their breathing seemed to dissolve before reaching their ears. The tunnel's walls were unnaturally smooth, curving inward like the throat of something vast. And as they went deeper, the air grew cold, impossibly cold for a tropical jungle. After 20 meters, Private Min stopped. "Sir," he said, voice trembling, "we're..." Still at the entrance, Captain Ree frowned. "What do you mean?" Min turned his flashlight toward the rear. The rope stretched back, taut, unbroken, but the light revealed nothing behind them. No mouth of the tunnel, no daylight. Just black. They pressed forward again, panic threatening reason. 50 meters, 70, 100. The air thickened like breathing through glass. Some of the men began to hear faint sounds now, a tapping, rhythmic, like footsteps that didn't belong to them. Corporal Hahn swore he saw movement, figures at the edge of his light, pale and tall, standing motionless. The others saw nothing, yet every hair on their arms stood up, and then came the voice. A whisper, low, indistinct, but it carried a terrible familiarity. It was the captain's own voice echoing from somewhere ahead, repeating his last order. "Move forward." The men froze. Min began to pull the rope backward, but it slipped through his hands like silk, vanishing into the dark. One by one, their flashlights flickered and died. In the final glow of the captain's beam, they saw something written on the tunnel wall, new, wet, as if carved seconds ago. "You have been here before." Then the light went out. When dawn broke outside, the jungle was silent. The ropes led only a few meters into the hollow before stopping, as if cut clean. There were no footprints, no signs of struggle. Just the same perfect circle in the rock as if nothing had ever entered. Days later, a rescue team arrived. They searched, mapped, drilled. The hollow was examined with instruments, but every reading came back wrong. Distances fluctuated. Temperatures dropped unnaturally. When they tried to photograph it, the film came out blank, pure white, as though the tunnel rejected being seen. Eventually, the site was sealed and marked off. Locals refused to go near it, calling it Mulut Tanah, the earth's mouth. They said it was a place that remembered the dead, that sometimes the land itself tried to call back what had been taken from it. Years passed. The jungle reclaimed the area. The story turned into a soldier's myth, a tale whispered in barracks and campfires about men who found a path that led not into the earth, but into themselves. Some said it was a psychological phenomenon, an echo chamber of trauma, a spatial hallucination triggered by exhaustion and fear. Others swore it was ancient, a remnant of the underworld pathways described in old animist lore, where the boundary between the living and the forgotten thins to a membrane. But sometimes, in the rainy season, when the clouds hang low and the forest hums, villagers still hear voices, distant, faint, coming from beneath the soil, orders shouted, footsteps marching in circles, and occasionally, laughter. The tunnel, they say, still breathes. And somewhere inside, the men are still walking, a deeper, always deeper, toward a light that never comes. The military never officially documented what happened in that jungle. In their reports, the missing platoon was listed as lost during reconnaissance, presumed dead. But rumors, those always survive longer than facts. A month after the disappearance, another unit was sent to secure the perimeter. Their orders were clear: avoid entering any unverified structures, record the terrain, and establish radio contact every 3 hours. Among them was Lieutenant Seo, a pragmatic man raised in the city who didn't believe in folklore or ghosts. Yet he carried the weight of memory. He had trained under Captain Ree. The captain had been like a father figure to him, the kind of leader soldiers trusted even in madness. Seo needed to know what happened, not out of duty but guilt. The jungle, however, seemed to remember. The moment the new unit crossed into the same valley, the air shifted. It was heavier, more electric. The birds fell silent as if the forest were holding its breath. Seo marked coordinates on his map. Yet by the 3rd hour he realized the compass was useless. It spun without pattern and the terrain itself looped back. They passed the same fallen tree 3 times, though none of them recalled turning around. One of the men muttered, "We're being led somewhere." By dusk they found it. The same tunnel, identical, untouched. But something had changed. Around the entrance the moss was gone and the earth looked disturbed, freshly turned. There were prints, not boot marks, but bare human feet, large, uneven, circling the opening. Seo ordered the men to camp a few 100 meters away. He wanted daylight before approaching, but that night none of them slept. Because the jungle didn't rest either. It began with a sound like wind moving through pipes, a hollow, metallic tone that seemed to come from beneath the soil. Then came whispers, not in one voice but many, faint, dissonant yet strangely rhythmic as though chanting. The translator among them said it sounded like Old Tagalog, but older, not words but phonetic fragments, echoes of speech before meaning. Just before dawn, Private June screamed. The others found him near the camp edge, trembling violently, staring into the trees. His pupils were dilated, his skin clammy. "They're here," he kept saying. "They're calling." When asked who, he pointed to the tunnel and whispered, "The ones who never left." By morning, June was gone. His rifle lay near the fire, his footprints leading straight toward the hollow. No signs of struggle, no broken branches, as if the forest itself had opened to receive him. Seo faced a decision: retreat, or uncover what was consuming his men. He chose the latter, not out of bravery, out of obsession. They entered the tunnel at noon when the light was brightest, though inside it didn't matter. The moment they crossed the threshold, their flashlights dimmed to a sickly yellow glow. The air was cold again, dry and sterile like the inside of a vacuum. Seo marked the walls with chalk every 10 steps, but soon the marks began to vanish. Erased, absorbed, or maybe rewritten. The tunnel twisted now, in ways that geometry shouldn't allow. Angles inverted. Distances expanded and collapsed. At times they could see their own shadows walking ahead of them, out of sync, delayed, as if trapped in a different rhythm of time. And then, they saw something impossible. Etched into the wall, illuminated by their flickering lights, were faces, hundreds of them, not drawn or carved but pressed into the surface, as though the rock had once been soft and captured the impressions of screaming men. Some looked recent. Some had helmets. Co raised his flashlight higher and his throat closed. Among the faces, half buried in stone, was Captain Ree, eyes wide open. For a moment the light bent, refracted like water. Co blinked and the captain's eyes seemed to move. His lips parted slightly and a faint voice came through, distorted and echoing from all around the tunnel. You shouldn't have followed. The walls began to pulse. The floor trembled and the cold turned into heat. One of the soldiers dropped his weapon and ran, screaming that he saw daylight ahead. The others followed instinctively, until they realized the light wasn't white but red. It wasn't an exit. It was a glow, alive, throbbing from deep within. They found themselves in a vast chamber, a hollow cathedral of stone. The walls curved upward like ribs, and in the center stood something that looked like a door, tall, black, and seamless. No handle, no hinges, just a vertical slit that shimmered faintly. The humming sound was loud now, almost deafening. Co approached, compelled by a force he couldn't explain. The closer he got, the clearer the whispers became. Voices calling his name, pleading, weeping. He thought he heard Captain Ree among them. He reached out a hand and the door opened, but not outward. It opened inward, like the world folded itself inside out. For 1 second, the soldiers saw everything, the jungle, the sky, the war, all inverted into a single, endless void. They saw figures walking within it, tall, thin, luminescent. The same symbols that circled the tunnel entrance spiraled across the air, alive with motion, rearranging themselves like language being reborn. Then, darkness. When Co awoke, he was lying at the base of the ridge. His radio was shattered. The sun was setting. The others were gone. The tunnel was gone, too. Only a flat wall of stone remained, smooth and featureless. He walked back to the clearing, disoriented, half-mad. Days later, a search team found him wandering near the river, muttering the same phrase over and over again. We weren't supposed to see it. He was discharged soon after. His report was sealed, classified as psychological trauma. He lived in silence for years, refusing interviews, avoiding anything that reminded him of the jungle. But before he died, he left behind a final note, scrawled in shaky handwriting pinned inside a notebook. The tunnel isn't a place. It's a memory, the earth remembering us. We leave footprints and sometimes the ground looks back. To this day, no map records that valley, but satellite images taken decades later show something strange. A perfect circular depression in the earth, surrounded by a pattern of runes, visible only after heavy rain. Locals say it's breathing again. They warn travelers not to follow the sound when the jungle calls, because some paths, once taken, never lead back to the world we know. The tunnel, they whisper, is not gone. It's waiting. Years passed. The war ended, the maps were redrawn, and the jungle and that eternal witness grew over the ruins of memory. But legends have a way of surviving borders and languages. By the time the next generation came of age, the story of the tunnel had become a soldier's ghost tale, retold around campfires, in remote outposts, or whispered during long marches when the forest pressed too close. Most dismissed it as myth. But among those who had once worn the uniform, there remained a quiet reverence, a sense that the land had claimed something and never given it back. Then came a journalist. Her name was Yoon Kyung Park, a war correspondent who had spent her life documenting forgotten conflicts. She wasn't chasing fame or thrill, only truth. Truth, however, is a dangerous thing when it lies buried under superstition and silence. In the spring of 1986, she arrived in a small border village in Laos, near the same mountain range where Captain Ree's platoon had disappeared decades earlier. The villagers still spoke of Mulut Tanah, the earth's mouth, with hushed tones. When Yoon Kyung asked for directions, they refused to answer. Some crossed themselves. Others spat on the ground, muttering prayers, but one old man, thin, blind, and trembling, agreed to speak. He said he had once guided soldiers there many years ago. They went in, he whispered, and the forest forgot them. The next morning, I saw their shadows still walking along the trees, but there were no men. Yoon Kyung wrote it all down, though her rational mind protested. She wasn't a believer in ghosts or curses. Yet something about the old man's tone, the absolute certainty of fear, unsettled her. She hired 2 local guides, set up a small camp near the ridge, and began her search. For 3 days she found nothing but dense undergrowth and old bomb craters swallowed by vines. The jungle seemed normal and deceptively so. But on the 4th evening, when the rain returned, she heard it. The hum. Low, distant, almost imperceptible, like a heartbeat resonating through the soil. She followed it uphill, her flashlight cutting through sheets of rain until she reached a clearing, and there, half hidden behind roots and ferns, she saw it, a perfect circle in the earth. Her breath caught. The entrance looked freshly uncovered, as though the jungle had been forced to reveal it again. Around the rim, the same strange symbols gleamed faintly, pulsing with the rhythm of the hum. The air smelled metallic, charged with static, and every instinct in her body screamed to turn back. But she didn't, because truth demands curiosity, and curiosity is its own curse. She placed her hand on the rock. It was warm. Then, in a flash of light, not from her flashlight, but from inside the tunnel itself, a soft, bluish shimmer that moved like water. She heard something, not words, but breath, a sigh. When she pulled her hand back, her palm was covered in fine dust. At first, she thought it was soil. Then she saw the shapes, small imprints of fingertips as if someone had pressed against the other side of the rock, reaching toward her. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her recorder captured strange sounds, fragments of voices, distorted, layered, whispering in a dozen tones. When she played it back, one phrase emerged clearly, "Still here." By dawn, her guides were gone. Their tents collapsed, their tracks leading down the trail. But the old man, the one who had spoken of shadows, was waiting near her jeep. When he saw her, he wept. "You shouldn't have touched it," he said. "Now it knows your name." For months after returning home, Yunkyung's recordings were studied by sound engineers. They found no signs of tampering, yet the frequencies defied explanation. Tones below human hearing mixed with impulses that seemed to originate from multiple spatial points at once. She wrote her report, but no publication would print it. Too speculative, too paranormal. So she turned it into a documentary. The film, Voices Beneath the Earth, aired once on public television in 1988, late at night, and was never rebroadcast. Viewers reported nausea, dizziness, even blackouts during certain sequences. One technician claimed the film spoke back through the speakers. The master reel was confiscated after a sudden power surge, destroyed the studio's equipment. Yunkyung vanished 2 weeks later. The last footage recovered from her camera showed her standing once more in the jungle. Her voice trembled as she said, "It's open again." Then the frame glitched, static, blinding light, and the film ended with the faint sound of marching. For decades, the story lay dormant. But in 2022, during a period of deforestation, a drone survey captured something strange deep within that same region. A massive circular depression, 200 meters wide, surrounded by evenly spaced trenches. The footage leaked online was removed within hours. Officials claimed it was an image processing error. Yet those who saw the still frame swore they could make out shapes, faint silhouettes, standing along the edge of the circle, like soldiers frozen in formation. And so the legend of Mulut Tanah continues, in part war story, part myth, part warning. No one knows what the tunnel truly is. A fracture in time, a memory loop, or a sentient scar left by human violence. But every few years, when the rains come and the jungle trembles, villagers say the hum returns. And if you stand very still, they claim, you can hear it calling, not with malice, but with longing. As if the earth itself misses the ones it has taken. The tunnel never leads nowhere. It leads home, to the place where all forgotten things go to remember. Inspired by Southeast Asian folklore of earth mouths and wartime myths of vanishing battalions, a reminder that some stories are not meant to be solved, only respected.